The Business is sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants.
Tonight, it's all about a raft of exciting ideas that are designed to help drive business in West Herts. We'll be hearing from Maria Cutler of St Albans Council, who's been very involved in the development of the City of Expertise. We'll be hearing from Tara Clark, who's driving the UK's first Centre of Excellence for Sustainability, right in our midst, right in Harpenden. John Dean and Sean Hughes of The Boot are both involved in the Visitor Partnership initiatives. And finally, we'll be hearing from Annie Brewster and Berwick Reed, who will be sharing with us some quite large targets for growth that all of these initiatives will be feeding. Our studio guest is business coach, advisor and mentor Alex Schubert, who's been with us many times before. And she's going to be sharing her thoughts with the business team on the value and efficacy of the initiatives. But first, let me introduce Trevor, Merriden and Clare McAnulty, my team tonight. Hello, folks.
Hello, folks.
Hello there. Hello, folks. So, Trevor, what's been happening in your world this week?
Well, too much to fit into this hour, but my view of the week is a decidedly local one. I went to an annual event, as did you, Vicky, held by the St Albans Chamber of Commerce at the Sopwell House Hotel on Friday, and to my shame, and through double bookings versus my own sort of business commitments previous years as a presenter of a show about business, it's the first of those sorts of events I'd been to that particular sort of jamboree, and I have to say I was really energised by it. I thought it was a great thing. And to be honest, not a lot of business was discussed. A lot of hair was let down with the help of some beverages. But what struck me was two things. What a lot of talented and determined business people we all had in the same room together. Many of them have been on our show. Many others will be in the future. And secondly, there was lots of brains and energy in that one place. And I just thought, well, St Albans pretty good shape, I think, as a sort of a bit of a hub of professional services, part of the theme of this show. So it kind of ties in, I think, sort of quite nicely with this tonight, Vicky.
It was certainly a great event, and all the brains that are on show in the early stages of the event does make you happy to be part of it all. I have to say it deteriorates quite rapidly later on in the afternoon.
I made my excuses and left at that stage. Maybe some of the energy went out of the room, I think, at various points. But it was,
It is, and it's become such a massive event. Actually, I was talking to a couple of people on my table, really, that one might have to move it from Sopwell House, because I know they could have actually sold about another 10 tables, they said. So it's really full. So what about you, Clare? Have you been having a good time recently?
Yeah, well, I noticed I've been looking at a lot of e-commerce sites and such like recently, and apparently this week was the start of what they're calling Mobilegeddon, which is if anybody runs a website and depend on it being at the top of Google, then the minute Google changes its algorithm is always a moment of dread, because your website drops down Google. But on Tuesday, Mobilegeddon started, and what Google's been doing is, for the last year, it's been saying how important it is that your website is mobile friendly. And starting from Tuesday of this week, any websites that are not mobile friendly will find themselves sort of dropping down Google. So it's quite interesting, actually, because I have a client and he runs a very, very big e-commerce website. He's got about 800 products on it, and it's going to be really, really expensive for him to have a mobile version of his website. But I think this might be the sort of the final decider for him. I think he'll just have to bite the bullet and pay out the money and get himself sort of mobiled up.
Does it actually take a complete redesign in order to make things mobile, or are there some sort of cheap and dirty tricks that you can do? Because I'm just wondering whether we need to get some big experts on the show to talk about this, if it's going to affect so many people.
Yeah, I think, well, it depends. I mean, most websites now, if somebody now builds you a website, they'll always do what they call a responsive website, which means it'll work in tablets, it'll work on phones, it'll work on a PC. but it's more older websites. And of course, I use the term older as in, internet years. So probably a 4-year-old website is now could be that it's not very mobile friendly. So so people do now have to look to make sure that their websites work on mobile.
I'll go Google going to give people a bit of time to get this sorted?
No, that's it. It started on Tuesday.
Tuesday,
21st. Yeah, the 21st. That's why it's been called Mobilegeddon, because everyone was told in advance it's starting on the 21st.
When you say everybody was told in advance, can I just ask? I know
no one contacted you.
A show of hands in a radio. Did anybody else know about it?
Well, it's not like we got some sort of like we'd get a note from HMRC telling us the tax system was about to change, but it's as serious, really, isn't it? Because I'd be really interested to know in about a month's time, some clever person is going to do a survey of who's dropped down the Google rankings the most, and who hasn't been mobile friendly.
I think most of the people that will suffer are the e-commerce sites, because it is very expensive. If you've got a website that's only got 5 or 6 pages on it, it's not going to be so expensive to turn it mobile. But it is like these big e-commerce websites that are they're just going to have to pay out, I guess.
Oh dear. Right. Well, on that bright note, I'm going to talk about my story, which a little bit like you, Trevor. It's a story about the wow factor in St Albans, and I was really, really excited by something that I saw recently. And to be perfectly honest, it takes quite a bit to excite me. I spent too much time hanging around the sort of creative agencies in London to very often be impressed with innovative workspaces, because I've seen so many different types of variations on hot desking and fancy furniture, all sorts of stuff. Chill rooms and no seat meeting rooms, all of those types of things.
Yeah.
It does take a lot to excite me. However, I went along with Marie Cutler, who we're going to be hearing from a bit later in the show, to the new workspace that Grant Thornton have opened. It's called Collaboration Space, and it is absolutely fabulous. It's really, really interesting. There's lots of different types of workspace there. There's lots of presentation space, there's soft areas, there's hard areas, there's meeting areas, there's places that are sort of slightly more soundproofed. It's designed beautifully because it's really interesting and sort of different. And I was just sort of like really excited to see that they were doing something quite different. And we do know that accountancy firms can tend to be a little bit on the dull side. And there they are, really leading the way in terms of new meeting area. So if you happen to be one of their clients or their friends, do check it out. If you're not one of those and you feel like having a look at it, then there's information on it on the Grant Thornton website, which is www.grant-thornton.co.uk, or you can also see the images of it on their page within the City of Expertise website, which we'll be talking about later. So I think a show about working space is definitely on my agenda. What do you think about that, team?
I think the whole area of collaboration is really coming to the fore now. I mean, in collaborative spaces, the types of technology that you can now have, which make collaboration across borders, across hierarchies in business and laterally between departments who don't normally talk to each other, is becoming a lot easier as well. So collaboration in all its forms, I think it shouldn't really be a new thing, because we should have all been collaborating. But in the process of businesses building and the collaborative mentality or spirit being lost, as often happens as a natural function of growth, we've kind of lost something, and we're kind of rediscovering that actually the full potential, liberated by great spaces, great technology, and lots of good creativity.
Well, and we're going to hear quite a lot about lots of different types of collaboration later on in the show, so it's all very much in keeping with what we're talking about. If you'd like to join in the debate, or you have some ideas of your own to contribute, then our studio number is 01727 839 926. Tweet at RVTheBusiness. Email us at thebusiness@radioverulam.com, or we've even got a whole YouTube channel showing all of the shows in the past, which is youtube.com/RVTheBusiness. Now, what I'd like to do is to start moving forward and introduce our studio guest. With us, we have got Alex Schubert, who we've had on the show, as I mentioned, a number of times before. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening. It's great to have you back. You're a business coach, advisor and mentor, and we really, really welcome your contribution. What would be really useful would be if you could tell us how you got into that sort of situation in the first instance. But I've just got to ask one question. Having looked at your CV and looked at you on LinkedIn, etc., as we all do these days, I happened to notice that you had at least a year, if not a little bit more, working with Whipsnade Zoo. Now, how do you go from working with Whipsnade Zoo to actually being a business mentor?
Well, this was actually a voluntary job at weekends, so I was doing both together, and I thought it might be quite nice to have a bit of variety and do something a bit different with my weekends. So I did that for about a year. I was an education volunteer. So it was really nice. I got to learn loads of interesting things about the animals, and then sort of be able to sort of tell all the visitors a bit more information about the animals and things. So it was really nice, actually. Lovely job.
I don't think you're old enough to remember Daktari or anything like that. Does anybody know Daktari?
No, I do.
Good.
Yes, I very much do. I am old enough.
I always wanted to work in a game reserve in the Serengeti or something. So when I saw Whipsnade, was it fantastic fun?
It was great fun. It was a lot of it was discussing with 7-year-old boys what would you do if a bear attacked you. There was a lot of things, but I'm quite interested in that kind of thing. So
how do you get from there to being a business mentor?
Well, I have to say my career history is a bit unusual, and I wouldn't necessarily advise this. Usually what happens is maybe you run your own business for several years, or people are in quite senior roles, and then tend to go into this sort of business coaching, advising from that way. But I very sort of randomly got into it at quite a young age. So I started as a Investors in People advisor, if you know the Investors in People standard. Yes. So I used to go into companies and sort of do a bit of a review of their processes, communication, the way they manage people, and sort of started working with in that way. And then actually I did the Whipsnade Zoo thing to keep me busy at the weekends, and then I decided I decided something different, and I decided to do an MBA instead. So that kept me busy. Then for a few more years, and that allowed me then to move into more of a kind of generalist business advising kind of role.
And you mentioned the word generalist. Are there particular types of businesses that you really like working with, or that are more your forte?
I've not thought about it really. I mean, I work with, every sort of business. Absolutely everything. And to be honest, I like that variety. And I think that there's actually a benefit in doing that, because you work with all these completely different kinds of companies of different sizes. And it's interesting how that knowledge can actually sometimes be carried into another company. So perhaps just the way of doing things, you can actually bring that to sort of give some ideas to a complete, perhaps a completely different kind of company. So all sorts of companies, really.
Yeah. Now, I quite often find myself saying, marketing's marketing. When somebody sort of says to me, do you have any experience of working with ground source heat pump engineers? Yeah. And it's sort of like, well, actually I do, but that's by the by. But in the first instance, the principles of most areas are quite similar. So they are transferable, which is excellent, isn't it? At the moment, you're working with all sorts of different types of businesses. We're going to go into a break very shortly, and we're going to start the show, which is all about driving business in West Hart. We've got a whole raft of clips, and Alex is going to actually share her thoughts and knowledge when we go through the clips, and really going to find out whether these initiatives are going to drive business in West Hart. So we'll be back just after this very short clip.
The Business, sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants.
Radio Verulam Community Partners. Ever feel a bit lost in this age of texting, satellite, TV, email, the internet and computers? Computer Friendly, a registered charity, is a training organisation whose prime objectives are to assist people in St Albans and District in gaining computer skills. You might be retired, unemployed or disabled in some way. You can drop into Fleetville Community Centre in Royal Road on Monday afternoons between 12:30 and 3:30pm to find out what Computer Friendly can offer that is just the thing for you. For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
Join me, Tatiana Colombo, on the Radio Verulam sofa for the Sunday supplement. Every week from 10 to midday, we'll have entertainment news, desert island dish, television highlights, and the sound of Sunday. That's the Sunday supplement with me, Tatiana Colombo, from 10 a.m. to midday on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Right, welcome back to The Business. Right, let's get on with the show and let's hear about the first initiative which celebrates the strength of professional services in St Albans. Evidently, we have over 80 accountancy firms and over 50 legal firms, would you believe it? And that's just the start. Now, Vicky met up recently with St Albans Council's Maria Cutler and asked her how it all came about.
Well, one of the things we've been doing in our economic development work is focusing on a number of projects, particularly where the district has its particular strengths in the local economy. And one of the things that the council felt was an advantage in the area, one of the economic advantages was the number of professional firms we have in the district. And we just wanted to make more of that, and in turn we want to encourage more business to the area in terms of other smaller businesses working with those other companies, but also in turn it then helps the local economy in general, particularly even the retail sector where people will go up and have lunches and use the restaurants. So it's a whole sort of local multiplier effect, effectively, working with the district strengths, one of which is professional services.
So why do you think it came about that so many professional services gathered together in St Albans?
I think a lot of it is probably historic, to do with the historical nature of the city, particularly on the law side. A lot of it was, some of it was purely because a lot of the companies were working with firms in the 80s who maybe underwent a restructure, particularly on the sort of accountancy side. And then sort of I think it just emerged really that these companies were here. St Albans is a good place to locate. It's outside the city, it's outside London, but it's also very accessible to London. And in terms of the location, in terms of the airports, rail, so lots of firms decided this is a good place to do business, and also a good place where they get a high calibre of local skills for people to work in those firms.
But certainly in my experience of talking to the accountants and the lawyers, of which, as you say, there are many, lots and lots of them sort of cut their teeth and started their careers in London before they actually moved out to sort of get a slightly different standard of living. But from a client perspective, does it mean that you're getting sort of London quality of experience, but at a regional price?
Yes, I think that's the case. I mean, what we want to sort of promote with this is that you get London experiences and knowledge without having the hassle of commuting into London. And what we want to do, we're very aware that a lot of our local residents, over 50%, commute into London to work. And what we want to try to let them realise that they can get that service locally, maybe going to work slightly later or work from home that day and get that service locally in St Albans. And then sort of it helps the local economy from that point of view. So yes, it's London expertise and London levels, but very locally literally on your doorstep.
Now, I've had a look at the website, and as I understand it, there are about 18 companies involved. At the moment, they do all seem to be law and finance. Are you planning on growing that? Are you planning on extending the sector?
Yes, we've recently extended it to chartered surveyors. So at this stage, we're keeping it quite tight. We're looking at, we're just seeing what level of interest, but we do want to keep it to those professional firms. For example, chartered surveyors, chartered accountants, and and solicitors.
And one of the things that are quite often is the case when you're sort of creating a marketplace like this is that legal people don't like competing with each other. So did you come across any objections to the concept of all being together in the same space?
I think initially it was initially quite hard to get off the ground. You're right, people are aware of each other and maybe slightly in competition. But I think as the meetings evolved, and also I think St Albans does have a very good networking, and the businesses do work very closely together, particularly through the District Chamber of Commerce too. It wasn't really such in competition. I think people felt that they'd all gain from each other, and especially if they could promote themselves as a whole cluster effectively.
And I also noticed that there's a lot of the big name brands. Our friends Kingston Smith are in there, SA Law. It's the great and the good of St Albans. Is there a barrier to entry for the smaller, more independent firms that maybe don't have regional offices or don't have the size and scale of those larger brands?
No, certainly not. If they are on the have the professional criteria, that's no objection to them being involved in that. We just need to sort of work it through, and we're working on projects for this year and looking forward to next year. And so obviously do encourage people to go onto the website and have a look.
Whilst we're on the website, what's the address of the website?
www.cityofexpertise.com.
Right, so that's a very interesting new initiative, isn't it? The City of Expertise. That was Maria Cutler. Alex, how well, though, do these types of initiatives work for small, medium-sized enterprises?
Well, I think with these sorts of initiatives, and there's lots of different things around. I think that one of the key things is if it's got a very kind of clear purpose and it's very obvious to everyone involved what the kind of the focus is. And the other thing is that because there are sort of lots of different things going on, I think if there's good links between the different initiatives and between the different organisations, it tends to mean that it works well. So what I mean by that is, if you sort of approach an organisation with a particular query, that person is aware of the sort of background and all the other. Do you see what I mean? And that can sort of refer you on. So I think those kind of aspects, if they're done well.
So do you essentially mean the sort of it's not just about whether it's a good idea or not, because I think most people would say this is a great idea, but it's about the signposting that happens sort of thereafter. Right. And I wonder, one question is, whether people still revert to the bigger brands of expertise that you might find in London, and just because I don't know whether that's a snobby value, let's go for the big London brands, or will they go to the local independents? Is there a bunch of people who will never choose local because they think actually perhaps they don't recognise what's on their own doorstep?
I don't know. It could be a sort of almost maybe a snobby thing, or maybe just a habit of thinking in that way that if you're looking for that kind of company, London is the place to be. There's really no particular reason for that when you think about it.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, the concept of it's really satisfying a few different areas, this, isn't it? So, from a council perspective, putting St Albans on the map for a different reason, to sort of say this is a city of expertise, we've got very, very talented people. If you're talented, why don't you come and live here? Why don't you come and work here? Why don't you set the business up here? And you've also got potentially the opportunity to keep talent in, so the younger talents, if these groups are also going to be setting up centres of apprenticeships, or enabling kids from schools to actually have a couple of days work experience, those sorts of things can really, really work. And then at the same time, because they're all working together, then maybe more people will put their business locally, even if it's with a regional law firm or what have you. So it's working on quite a few different levels, isn't it? Which I think is quite exciting, and it's going to be interesting to watch. And I do hope that maybe 6 months down the line, we'll be able to get some people in and maybe talk to some people on the street to find out whether they think it is working, because that's going to be the biggest measure of success.
I also think maybe the act of just sort of taking stock, if you like, of the fact, actually stopping, like the stat that we had about sort of 80 accountants and 50 whatever it was, sort of things like that. Actually, to think, gosh, that is a lot of talented sort of brainy people,
it certainly is,
on our doorstep.
Okay, so let's move on to the second clip, which is quite a different area of business. This is the Green Triangle, and it's a collaboration between BRE, which is the Business Research Establishment, which, if you haven't been to see their innovation centre, you really must. It's fantastic. It's really, really interesting to see how your future might look, how you could be living well, certainly our kids might be living, if not us. It's a collaboration between them, Rothamsted Research Centre, who are developing sustainable crops, Arts University, which I think has recently been voted University of Innovation, and Oaklands College. And I met up with Tara Clark, the Business Development Manager of the Green Triangle, to find out about it and why it will help the SMEs in West Herts.
Okay, so the Green Triangle was initially thought up by St Albans City and District Council, who decided they wanted to do something to bring together companies involved in green technology, agritech, agriculture. They then had conversations with what are now our key partners, so that's Rothamsted Research, BRE, University of Hertfordshire and Oaklands College, who talked about the scheme for a while and then decided it was something that they really wanted to go for. So they established how they wanted to work, what they wanted to see happen in the future, which is to make Hertfordshire a globally renowned centre of excellence for green technology, and then how they could push it forward, how they could support businesses through the scheme.
So how are they supporting businesses through the scheme?
Okay, so we're going to launch the Green Triangle on the 21st of May, a breakfast event that's free and being held at BRE, and at that event businesses will particularly be able to find out how the Green Triangle can help them, and that's through support through our partners, discounts on the services that they offer, events, and a range of other business support services, whether it be specific to the green industry or generic business support.
What are the sort of key incentives to actually develop within the sustainable arena?
So particularly through the Green Triangle, we would look to work with companies who are already in green sectors, so that's anything like I've mentioned with sustainable construction, renewables, any environmental or sustainable business, agritech, agriculture, and then companies that might not necessarily be a green sector company could look to get involved, because through the Green Triangle we'll be supporting them in how they can make their companies more environmentally friendly, how they can reduce their carbon footprint, and there isn't always a cost attached to that. It's about coming along to our events and looking at the programs that we've got in place to actually support companies in finding new ways of actually doing that.
So some of it's educational for companies that aren't actually in the green sector in terms of what they're producing or the service that they're offering. It's helping smaller companies be more green as well.
Yeah, we're not going to really restrict what we're doing, so we'll have different things in place. So for the green sector companies, it will be how to upskill employees, how to maybe develop in new areas, whether there's new innovative ideas that they want to take to market. Also business startup, if there's people out there who are looking to start a green sector company, we've got various support mechanisms in offer to help them establish. But then, as I say, with the companies that aren't maybe in green sectors, we'll be doing training and looking at ways that they can take their companies as they are at the moment and make them more sustainable into the future, which then may help them sort of branch out and grow into other areas.
Now, you mentioned a lot of help. Is the cost attached to this help? That's one of the first things that small businesses worry about, that the help, the support is going to cost them money.
Okay, so to actually become a member of the Green Triangle, we are a membership organisation, but we're a free membership organisation, so the only cost attached is basically a £25 registration fee to cover administration. once a company becomes a member, they can then access all of our products and services at heavily discounted rates. So BRE or the university might run courses and they can get maybe 20% discount on that. There's going to be free webinars. The business support element, so generic business support will be free, and then specific business support, it depends on what the partners are offering and what the companies are looking for. So particularly BRE and university have a scheme called innovation vouchers, and through the Green Triangle, we can sort of make those introductions to people so they can access them. So there is a cost attached, but it's very much matched by the partners. And also there is introductions that can be made into industries through the established networks of our partners.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. So the launch is on May the 21st. How do people come along to the launch? How do they find out about it?
So they can email me, which is tara.clark, no E on Clark, at oaklands.ac.uk, or go onto the Green Triangle website, which is www.thegreentriangle.org.uk, or also if you go onto the BRE website and their events page, it's listed on there and you can book online. And it's...
Oh, I think it's really interesting, and I'm so proud that West Herts is sharing this sort of expertise with the SME community. We'll be discussing the Green Triangle with Alex Schubert and Trevor Merriden and Clare McAnulty after this short break.
The Business, sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants.
At Kingston Smith, our ethos is simple. We want our clients to succeed. Welcoming owner-managed businesses and individuals, we pride ourselves on offering the local business community a range of services that best supports their needs for maximum growth. Kingston Smith, helping our clients succeed. Find us on St Peter Street in the heart of St Albans, or for more information, head to kingstonsmith.co.uk.
If you want to get in touch with The Business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
And welcome back. You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. I'm Victoria Scott, and I'm here in the studio with Trevor Merriden and Clare McAnulty and our studio guest, business coach Alex Schubert. Tonight's show is all about driving business into West Herts, and we've just heard from Tara Clark, who's the Business Development Manager at the Green Triangle. Alex, did you know that we had such internationally recognised sustainability experts in Hertfordshire?
Well, yes, I did. Well, actually, I actually worked at BRE for a little while.
Oh, right.
It was one of my first jobs, and I've worked at the University of Hertfordshire as well. So,
so you're 50% of the way there.
Yeah, nearly there in knowing what they do. So, yeah.
So, how important do you think sustainability is to the future of business?
Well, I think it's incredibly important, in general for everybody. So I think it's really exciting that there's an initiative that is supporting businesses that are coming up with, new inventions and new ideas around that. So, yeah.
And do you think, one of the problems with sustainability, which is an awful thing to say, but it's costly. So if you're going to use sort of recycled paper, there has been cost attached. If you are going to, recycle this or change the way you do business. Historically, it's been a quite, you've had to really want to do that in order to make it work for your business. Are those costs coming down at the moment?
Yeah, I think they are. I think it's interesting what you said. I think there is a shift in mindset that has to happen with that, because it is moving from a sort of more short-term view, as you say, to a kind of longer-term view. And I think, on a more global level, that is the way we need to start thinking about things, and we need to start, planning much further ahead with every aspect really of our lives in terms of being more sustainable.
I think it's quite interesting because there's some simple things that you can do, like switching lights off and putting computers on hibernate and printing on both sides of the paper. But also there's that whole other tranche that the Green Triangle are looking to do, which is to actually support businesses that are actively involved in businesses that are green, as it were, as opposed to just the sustainability within business. So what sorts of businesses do you anticipate would be getting involved in the Green Triangle?
Well, it's a complicated thing, really, because it is quite broad. When people talk about green businesses, you'll have sort of certain things in mind, but actually it can cover all sorts of things. So we could be talking about a business that is developing green technology, could be talking about a business that is actually involved with green energy on that kind of level, but by the sounds of this project, it is covering quite a few things. So it is covering both the kind of the when you think of the sort of the technology and science and research type side of things, but then at the other end it does sound like it's also about the lower level stuff, I suppose, like you're saying, like the businesses becoming more sustainable and the recycling and those kind of things. So it sounds as if the scope of this kind of covers really all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to endorse something Alex was saying, because it comes up in the technology points you made just now, but also about the fact that you were saying, Vicky, about it being costly. I mean, it depends on who's costly, of course, because it can be costly for a business to introduce certain things in the short term, the thing you were saying, Alex, but it's also about the mindset in the sense of costly where, it's costly to be a polluter, it's maybe not be costly for you, but it's costly for that business down the road, and it's costly for all sorts of things. So it's about that moving from the mindset of the individual to the collective, which I think must be both the trouble is it's so profound and it's so kind of systems thinking that it's difficult to get that across sometimes, isn't it? In terms of a sort of coherent message, which is why I guess a lot of these sorts of initiatives really can struggle. It doesn't sound like, from the interview, the Green Triangle sounded very clear. I think,
and they've got a lot of experience behind them. They've got a lot of technical know-how. They've got all sorts of different sort of experts on hand to really help it move forward. So, I for one really do hope that it takes off and that it works, because I think it's fascinating. It's really interesting, and I think the other bit of that sort of Green Triangle, the other bit of the triangle, is the consumer. And I think increasingly consumers are wanting the companies that they do business with to be showing green initiatives, not wasting and really sort of driving things forward.
And also recruits as well to those,
absolutely,
to the industries, not just customers, but also recruits. They might not want to join a business that doesn't take that sort of thing seriously.
Let's all say a big thumbs up to the Green Triangle, and then let's hope it all works. And we'll hear more about their launch also in the autumn. That's not their launch in the autumn. Their launch is actually in May, so I get that right. But once it's established, we'll get them back in. So our next initiative up for discussion is the Business Partnership. And firstly, we're going to go to John Dean, who's the chairman of the Visitor Partnership, and the value that it's going to add to St Albans. So let's hear from John Dean.
The Visitor Partnership it's an economic group, by which I mean it's about bringing sustainable visitor economy to St Albans and the district. In doing so, that should have an impact on the residents here, because of course that brings business with it, but it should also mean a nicer city centre, a nicer district, and we're doing this to have an economic impact on that is lasting. Problem with St Albans is that we've got all these lovely venues, but we're not making the most of them, and we are now looking to use the partnership to bring people together, so that venues work together, so that businesses work together, so that we can actually create the mentality of a destination in the city.
Now, we all know that St Albans has got a lot of very nice independent shops and independent places to eat. In some ways, do you think this is part of the problem, that actually everyone's working on their own area, and that in fact if everybody got together to encourage more people in general to come into St Albans, that all the businesses would do well out of it?
It's exactly that. We do know from the work we've done already that there are people who are running restaurants, there are people who are running nightclubs and venues, there are people who are running pubs. And at the moment they see the other restaurants, pubs, nightclubs, venues as direct competition. Whereas with those people working together and St Albans was seen as the place to go to eat, the place to go for a drink, the place for nightlife, whatever those things are. By working together, that can be created. And actually people are hopefully starting to find that people who are already members of the Visitor Partnership are finding that actually they can work with other people and create an environment where people can come in. If several restaurants are working together, it becomes known as a great place to come. And that's the mental shift that we need in St Albans.
And that was John Dean, the chairman of the Visitor Partnership. And one of the first people to join the Visitor Partnership was Sean Hughes of The Boot. So let's hear from Sean.
We've always kind of worked with the council on these ideas, and I think the Visitor Partnership is a great idea. I'm quite involved with Pub Watch, and as are all of the other pubs in the centre of town and on the outskirts. And being part of the Visitor Partnership with Pub Watch has kind of enabled us to ensure that the pubs are well spoken for when the whole thing goes live. The idea of the visitor strategy, and the reason why I wanted to get behind it is because we want to kind of pull everything in so that people can actually see the variety of what St Albans has to offer. It kind of brings the business community together. I mean, obviously, there's so many different areas in the business. You've got things like the Chamber of Commerce, you've got Pub Watch, you've got other different restaurant associations. There's lots of different small groups which all needed to kind of be pulled together. I think that's kind of just brought people together. Pubs in general need a lot of support, so we're always going to be behind increasing visitor numbers into St Albans. We want to see as many visitors as possible. I think there's some other cities in the UK that are smaller than ours that have double the figures of visitors that we do. So we've got a big area to really develop the visitor numbers and, drive a lot more business into the town.
Well, that was John Dean, chairman of the Visitor Partnership, and Sean Hughes, one of the owners of the Boot Pub. Now, Alex, bringing more visitors always has a positive effect on business. Whether it's the shops and restaurants or the knock-on effect of those businesses doing well. And collaboration seems to be a theme through all of these clips so far. But there's always that sort of competitive urge that goes on. I mean, should businesses be concerned about competition or be happy about collaborating on these sorts of things?
Well, it is interesting, isn't it? Because, on one level you are, say you're running a restaurant, you're, looking at the other restaurants in the road and seeing them as competitions, which they are. But, as we know, if you start getting an area where there's a few restaurants kind of building up and it's busy and people will then go to that area because they know that's where the restaurants are. So it's an interesting paradox, isn't it? You need your competitors there to kind of build the area. But you've got to kind of still have your eye on the fact that they're competition as well.
So when should they pull the shutters down then and not collaborate? I guess that's the $64,000 question, isn't it?
I suppose. Absolutely. But I think, I think the collaboration is a key area, and when they were just talking about it there in the interview about the fact that there are all these different small groups bringing together, I think that's a really key aspect, because there's always a lot of initiatives and a lot of different kind of business groups and things like that, and there's a lot of benefit, I think, to bringing those things together and making sure that people know everything that's going on.
I suppose it's if there's a common good of which there is, obviously, in getting visitor numbers up because you're growing the market, maybe that's the extent of it. Then once they're in the town, then they're anybody's, really. That's when the competition comes out.
And it's also true that they may have come for one purpose, and then while you're there, it's the usual thing, while you're there you might as well go and have a cup of coffee, or you might as well, you're passing a shop, you might as well go in. So it is logical just to try and get more traffic in first, to get more people in first, and then concern yourself with with beating your next door competitor or whatever.
I think it also makes sure that the quality's good, because if you have got a restaurant next door to you, then people have got choice, and if they've got choice, then you've got to be at the top of your game, and that's sort of good for everybody then, I think, really, isn't it? It's true.
I met up with Annie Brewster and Beric Reid, and I should stress that actually this is back when the Visitor Partnership scheme was launching last year, and they've got some pretty hard targets to reach to measure the success of the Visitor visitor partnership. And so I started by asking Annie why it's important to measure things in these sorts of initiatives.
I think it's probably a sense that a lot of places were just sort of bumping along and everyone thought it was all right, and it's only when the recessions hit, when people are struggling, that we start to look why, and we start looking at figures and see what's going on. And some of the listeners probably think we don't want any more people to come in. It's difficult to park, it's difficult to this, difficult to the other, but we've got to, if we want to keep the city centre to be moving, then we do have to look at these issues.
Can I add to that? One of the key things also is to join up everything. So it's not just the visitor partnership, it's also the shops in the city centre working together to have a city centre manager to try and sort out all of their bin collections in the alleyways and stuff, to try and tidy up the city centre at the same time, which we're doing. It's saying, I mean, I've got targets for 40% increase in the number of visitors by 2018. Well, I had to put parking strategy in to make certain we can cope with that as well. So it is joining everything up that's key.
You've got some specific meaty targets that the Visitors Partnership's going to work to.
Yes, when we were setting up, because we started by looking at the evidence base for what had been happening before, and there's a measurement tool in the tourism industry called the Cambridge model. So we worked around that because that's what other cities are using, and it was quite good for benchmarking things. But what we're looking at is for 2018, we are looking at a 40% increase in the number of visitors.
Okay.
So that's from 1.6 million to 2.2 million. We're looking at a 55% increase in the visitor expenditure. Now, that's quite, on purpose, that's a higher number than the number of visitors, because it's the way we're targeting things. So that's 160 million up to 250 million.
So not just more tourists, but more tourists spending more money.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we're also looking at an increase in full-time jobs in the visitor. These are visitors, not just tourists. So they might be visiting for business as well as for. It's a slightly bigger sort of description than just tourists. But a 52% increase in the number of people working full-time in the industry.
I do like the idea of a parking strategy, because we definitely need one of those. Some really serious targets there, Alex, aren't there? So it's good to hear that they are actually measuring this. It's incredibly important to be able to measure success in initiatives. And do you think that those sorts of initiatives are going to be able to deliver those sorts of numbers?
Well, I mean, I hope so. It's difficult to say, isn't it, at this stage? But I mean, you're right that if you're not sort of starting off with a way of measuring that, I mean, you know,
who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And do you find that businesses sort of tend to shy away from trying to measure success?
Oh, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, the thing is that there are. I think the kind of the broader issue with the measuring is that there are some things that are quite easy to measure, and you know, the financial things, for example, are, you know, you've got some set numbers there, you can kind of see where they are. The interesting thing about that is then that you tend to be driven towards putting your efforts into the things that you can measure in that sort of quantitative way, whereas there are lots of other things that you need to be doing and that are just as important, that are quite difficult to measure. You know, I don't know, you know, satisfaction, that customer satisfaction level, such a difficult thing to really measure and put a figure on. But
and it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, if they increase visitors by 40% and there is not enough car parking and there aren't enough restaurants and there aren't enough coffee shops, then everybody's going to get pretty fed up pretty quickly, you know, or you can't move because there are too many bodies, because actually the town isn't that big. You know, so it is quite difficult.
It's quite tricky to measure, and also, you know, they might see that as successful. You know, the number, the increase in the number of visitors might be seen as being successful, but probably not for people that live and work in St Albans.
And it's another sort of B2C type of initiative as well, isn't it? Do you think we ought to be seeing more B2B style initiatives? I mean by that business to business initiatives rather than business to consumer initiatives. You know, this is about consumers and driving. Now that will obviously drive businesses and drive more, but should we be seeing some more business to business initiatives, do you think?
I mean, I think that there are sort of things going on that are trying to encourage a lot more local things to go on, so a lot more local businesses to do business with other local businesses, and I think that's really good. I mean, there are things around, but yeah, that is an important aspect as well.
And this is the sort of thing that the Chamber of Commerce and those sorts of organisations ought to be driving, do you think?
I think so, and I think a lot of these organisations are starting to come into their own now, because there is or supposedly has been for the last 5 years, been a localism agenda, that's been going on in terms of passing down powers to the local council. I don't think it's gone quite as far as the government has the government from 2010 to 2015 has actually hoped, but that's definitely the coming thing, in terms of, if you're being stretched at one level by sort of EU powers and at the other level, people want more control over their lives. The inevitable consequence is that the national powers sort of get squashed down a bit and go down to a local level. So I think there's inevitably going to be a focus on more local business initiatives, and I think these sorts of things are going to come into their own. So it's the local chambers of commerce and other such societies are going to become more and more important. That's in a networking sense. I think that lots of how can businesses help other businesses in a more formal sense, maybe more coaching and mentoring between businesses. That's another great example of what Alex was talking about before, about where collaboration finishes and competition starts. Maybe there's something you can roll back the barrier of competition slightly in favour of collaboration. Actually, what harm does it do you to help another business in terms of developing their talent in some way?
That's interesting. Have you ever been in a situation whereby you have been able to sort of say, do you know what, I think you really ought to talk to Fred from XYZ because I think he'd really be able to help you? Have you been able to do that?
Absolutely. That's part of the job I really like doing, actually, is there's quite a few situations where I've put people in touch who are in a kind of similar kind of business, because I mean, that's the tricky thing. As I said, I work with lots of different kinds of businesses, but I've obviously not got in-depth knowledge of the sort of technicalities of every single thing. So quite often people want to be able to talk to somebody and say, thinking of a couple of companies I work with who are developing food products and wanting, they also, they need this general business advice, but they also have some quite specific questions about, what do I need to ask a manufacturer, what kind of supply, all those sort of more, more detailed things. And when you can put people together that can have a chat about that, that's great.
Yes, it really is, and it's very exciting, isn't it? And I think, certainly in my experience when I've been able to do that, people really like to help other people. Once they've got over the shock of sort of being asked and worrying about whether they're giving away the crown jewels, it's very satisfying. It makes you sort of feel as though all the years that you've been in business, being able to pass that knowledge on. I've really seen people almost change personality as a result of being able to help.
I think too, people forget that when you work in a particular business, you know a lot more than you realise. That to you it's normal to know certain things, but actually when you get into discussion with someone that's not in your business, there are a lot of things they don't know, and that you're quite happy to pass that knowledge on, because to you it's just your everyday your everyday work.
I think it works in so many ways, actually, that you have the sort of the genuine feeling of doing good by things, but also for those who just like to show off, in terms of things like that, it's good for them as well, because they give an avenue through which to say, look at me, I know lots, and it kind of works. But whether it's enlightened self-interest or genuine enlightenment, it doesn't matter in a way, because if you're sharing, then I think you're definitely benefiting, and I think it's a strong theme emerging from this show, isn't it?
It is. It really is. Yeah. Do you think that we talk all the time about networking and that? Do you think that this whole collaboration area ought to almost be on more agendas outside the official networking groups? Do you think businesses should try and sort of put it on the agenda within their boardrooms, for example? Who can we work with on this? Is that something you might think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that Yeah, I mean, I think that informally there's a lot of things going on. It does tend to, you've got obviously a lot of good networking groups around, and you've got, like you mentioned, the Chamber of Commerce and lots of organisations like that. But actually, a lot of it, I think, happens informally, and you kind of have a chat with somebody and you find they're very knowledgeable about a certain area, or you've got a common interest, and it will kind of happen like that. But I think, we were talking about sort of teaming up with people who are in a very similar industry. I also think there is a benefit in sort of networking with people in quite different areas, because I think that's where that you get that sort of inspiration for that sort of more creative thinking, and the sort of innovation that comes out is when you look a little bit broader than your immediate circle of business contacts.
And isn't that what effectively the definition of creativity is when you get thing A and thing B, and they don't normally come together, but they do come together, and then they produce something that's unusual. Yeah, so C, in fact, yeah.
C or D.
Yeah, maybe even D. Yes, and so I mean that's it's a wonderful thing, and it's amazing how we don't do that more often. I think that somehow we all get stuck in our little silos, despite our good intentions.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you enormously, Alex Schubert. You've, as always, helped us enormously with the discussion. Trevor, anything you'd like to summarise it in terms of what do you think is the most important thing you've learnt this evening?
Yeah, I think that there's something very interesting here. We've been talking a lot about initiatives, about how they drive business, and when it comes to, say, maybe council involvement and so on, we're seeing a pattern of really good initiatives, and what their common feature is that they are catalytic in nature, and they provide the environment in which things are. They've got to set some clear goals and some strategies, and they've got a certain amount of money in the pot to actually sort of create awareness of these things, but actually they're just inspiring and enabling people to actually then go on and use them. Ultimately, if they've got the creativity, those people, those businesses will actually then go on and do it for themselves, but they need to have a bit of a shove, I think, and that's what it is. It's not the heavy hand of government, it's the light sort of catalytic prompt
push. Push.
Yeah.
And Claire, what about you?
Well, the reason I like initiatives really are that they provide a focus, and we all know when you're running a business, it can be quite difficult sometimes to keep a focus. You've got so many different things going on, but with these initiatives it kind of forces, for example, all the people involved in the visitor partnership, or they all have to meet up at some stage. They maybe physically meet up in a room, they all get to chat, and it does provide a focus. That's what I like about the whole thing of the initiatives. And I do think, as Vicky said earlier, the whole eco-friendly green thing has become more and more important to people, and we should really take note of it.
Thank you, all of you. I think it's been a really, really interesting discussion. With many thanks to our contributors, Maria Cutler of the City of Expertise, Tara Clark at the Green Triangle, John Dean and Sean Hughes of the Visit Partnership, and last but not least, Annie Brewster and Beric Reid. You've been listening to Victoria Scott, Trevor Merriden and Clare McAnulty on The Business.
The Business, sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants. If there's anything in the show you want to talk to us about, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.